who are we? We are one of the largest solar contractors in the province of Manitoba. I would say we've been around for about 10 years now and going strong and continue to grow. So located on Erin Street in Winnipeg, but we service all of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Northwest Ontario, and we do a fair bit of work in Nunavut as well. So what we do, we design, supply, install photovoltaic systems that power homes and commercial buildings and communities. Our mission to promote the use of clean energy through electrification and provide resilient power solutions to our clients. So this is a common misconception for a lot of people who are just getting into solar power. Most of what we do, and I think Tye is going to talk about something different afterwards, but most of what we do does not include batteries. It is not about cutting the power to the building. It's about augmenting and supplementing your power with solar energy. So offsetting some of your existing, building energy with, electrons less traveled. So it'll be, electrons coming from your roof into your building as opposed to coming from the utility into your building. And that transition between the two is seamless. So, when there isn't enough power happening on the roof, it comes from the utility. So that's mainly the type of stuff that we do. We do some battery stuff, but not related to buildings at all. So, this is a little bit of an illustration, sort of a simplified illustration of how that utility interactive system works. And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of why it, could be a good opportunity for you in your home or business. So what can a solar investment do for my home or business? So traditionally, when we're, selling this to customers, there's always the sustainability sustainability factor. For us, in Manitoba, it gets difficult to make a case for solar being more sustainable than hydropower. They're both sustainable sources of energy. So if you're offsetting, your power, for us in Manitoba, we typically are making a financial case for this to our customers. So there are scenarios where it can be a little bit different, like in large commercial buildings where you're trying to offset where you have to hit energy targets. Then, you can go, okay, well, I've done everything that we need to do with our HVAC systems and lighting systems, and we're still not there. What can we do? We can add like building integrated photovoltaics, or we can add a rooftop solar array and augment the power a little bit just to get you to that, target that you're trying to achieve. But for the most part, when we're selling these to our customers, we're selling it based on what it's going to do for them financially. So here's a little diagram essentially showing, what you're doing here. You're buying a solar panel system, at this point in the price rate hike with Manitoba Hydro as it's going up over the years. When you amortize the cost, your capital expense that you pay for the system, say you pay $10,000 for the system and the system's going to last you 30 years, you get to a average cost of power over the next 25 years. So you end up in that 5 to 6 cents range per kilowatt hour. A lot of times we equate this to like pre-purchasing all your fuel for your vehicle for 20 years in advance at a lower price. Certainly there's, it's not as simple of a calculation as that, but the point is you're prepaying for all your electrons off the roof of your system, and then you're, amortizing that cost over 25 years. Traditionally, it's been difficult to make, with the cost of capital, it's been a difficult case to make. Just because if you're saving 2 cents, but you're paying for it all up front, then there's a cost of, a large capital expense like that. Nowadays, though, with the cost of the systems coming down and some really creative financing programs, really great financing programs, in fact, and some other tax credits and rebates, that capital cost has come down to the point where it's become feasible in a lot of cases. And again, of course, promoting sustainability, this works a lot better outside of Manitoba than in Manitoba. But, even the optics of having a solar system on a building, for a lot of companies, that's enough. So a lot of companies will put these up just just because they want the optics that they're doing something to promote green energy. So one of the benefits here, we got this amazing rebate from Efficiency Manitoba, who I saw some of their representatives on the call here today. This actually is an old slide that they provided me. This system cap is no longer 50 kilowatts, and this max has been lifted as well. So you can get some pretty substantial rebates from Efficiency Manitoba. So that's one thing that's really helping with the commercial and residential sales of solar panels in Manitoba right now. Another big part here that's just come into effect recently is the Clean Technology Investment Tax Credit. So that is up to a 30% tax credit for refundable tax credit for any tax-paying entity. So essentially, you can get 30% off this the solar install. So with 50 cents a watt and then 30% off, we're talking about discounts that are in and around that 50% of the system mark. So when you're looking at that capital investment, now that it's been cut in half, the number that number that you're investing starts to look a lot more attractive when you're talking about paying 3 cents a kilowatt hour for the power off the roof rather than paying 7 or 8 cents for the next 25 years. So it starts to become a more feasible financial investment. So I've got a slide here, and this next example is sort of a financial example. You're not going to see an example like this in the real world. I will tell you this would be an ideal roof mount, 45-degree tilt, perfectly facing south, no obstructions. Like this system doesn't exist. In most cases, there will be obstructions, angles to the roof, other issues that come up. But as far as a best case scenario, you could have for a 50 kilowatt system, a $110,000 top line cost, a 30% refundable tax credit, $25,000 rebate. And there is also an accelerated capital cost allowance for businesses. So that means you can write 100% of the system off in year one. So assuming, again, making some assumptions that you're paying 26% in taxes for a corporation, your potential cost after rebates and tax savings would be in and around $35,000 with an annual savings of roughly $6,000. So you can see, obviously this example isn't going to be a real world one. This is more ideal, and the numbers won't quite get to this mark, but there is a business case to be made now for solar panels in Manitoba, where in the past there really has not been. So when you're talking about a few years return on investment, businesses start to look at that. So then we get to some obstacles for growing the solar market in Manitoba. So some of our barriers, one of the big ones is Manitoba Hydro, and due to no fault of their own, we have low rates here, which in that rate triangle that I showed you, it makes that delta a little bit smaller than it should be. And if you were paying 15 or 16 cents a kilowatt hour, then paying 4 or 5 cents buying your power in advance would seem a lot more favorable. So the other thing, Manitoba Hydro, again, they're mainly concerned with stability and peak demand. And because solar power is producing its power primarily in the summer and in daylight, and Manitoba Hydro as a winter peaking utility, they see their peak in the evening in the winter. It really doesn't align, and so they don't really look at solar as something that will assist them in meeting their customers' peak demand, and therefore they kind of devalue the power devalue the energy a little bit more. So they're not really willing to look at it. And any discussions that we've had with them for utility scale projects, they're not overly eager to provide a good power purchase agreement on that. So that is a bit of a barrier, and it's I think it's just that Manitoba Hydro's interests and our interests as a solar industry don't align 100%. So next we got government policy. Again, I mentioned the rebates and tax credits that are now in effect. These things are ever changing, so it is a roller coaster for the solar industry in Canada and the US. There's always changes either from the utility or from the government, just on either policy, rebates, that take our industry from, really, really high demand to, the next day, no demand. We had one of these recently with the Greener Homes program, which, they said, oh, well, we got all this money, and it's going to go on until 2028. And then they said, oh, in December this year, they said, oh, well, we ran out of money early, so we're going to end it in March. And then, so we had this giant rush of customers coming, oh, we need solar panels, and then it dropped and it stopped. And so we're now in a bit of a lull until they announce a new program. And that's sort of what our industry has done, for the past, at least since I've been in it, for the past 10 years. So something a little more stable, like these investment tax credits are actually quite good. And if we could get these implemented in the residential sector, that would be a lot better, because really to change the tax code is a lot more difficult than it is to just implement a rebate. And those actually require, legislation to change. So if we could get a few things enshrined in tax code, and they have this in the United States, then we would get a more stable market for the solar industry. But it looks like we're going to have some stuff on the commercial side. The residential side likely won't see that. So
we're kind of an off-grid is kind of where we've morphed our company into. We're asked to work on busting the myth of solar panels having no major role in Manitoba's energy mix. We're going to go a little bit different than Daniel, but everything he said is very accurate with what we found with any grid tie. But again, we don't really do that. So a little bit about us. We specialize in modular off-grid power and water solutions, and it's kind of morphed into solar design and installation, mainly off-grid in remote corners of Canada and a lot in northern Manitoba. Heavy vehicle EV conversions. Some people might know about the Tundra buggies in Churchill. Those were designed at our shop. And in the picture there, you see the big white unit that some of us are standing in front of. That's a kitchen, a commercial kitchen that's actually part of the Tundra Buggy Lodge, which is out on the shore of the Hudson Bay. And that's actually a commercial kitchen that supplies power to the rest of the lodge by a diesel electric hybrid with about 4,000 pounds of lithium batteries on board there, which has cut the fuel consumption on the lodge to about a third, which is significant when we're in a remote location where fuel has to be hauled over the tundra where there is polar bears everywhere. Next slide here. So a little bit of where we are going to argue this point is the actual natural factors which are part of Manitoba's energy. So Manitoba is one of the best provinces in terms of the natural factors that influence the maximum amount of energy that the system can produce. We find that the natural reason why the solar system is good for Manitoba is that when it is sunny, it's usually either very cold or very hot. And it somewhat supplements where there are extreme temperature changes in Manitoba. When it's cold, it's usually sunny, and a large amount of Manitoba is actually heated by electric heat, a disproportionate compared to some other provinces. And when it's very hot, we think, air conditioning, fridges, freezers, all fighting the heat of the sun. And solar, in some cases, directly offsets some of those surges. Not all of them, like Daniel spoke to, but it is directly related to refrigeration in some ways. There's a quick case study I just wanted to, this has to do with Manitoba as well. I don't know if anybody's heard of York Factory. It's a National Historic Site up on the, it's up past Gillam. It's actually up the Hayes River. A very interesting part of Manitoba's history and North America's history. We've put an off-grid system into there, and just a couple of things related to that, which are significant in terms of real-world numbers. So, York Factory that's the building in the picture there. That's the old trading post basically. There's nothing left except that building now. And then kind of where this picture is taken from is a staff house. That's Park's kind of the staff, and some indigenous knowledge keepers stay there. Some people that work on the building, restoration specialists. They're there for approximately 14 weeks a year now, starting in June to September. Before we started adding solar to the staff house, they would run approximately 300 hours of diesel generator. It's a 10 kilowatt diesel generator there. We've slowly added some solar based on budgets, federal government budgets, and that to the staff house. And directly related, they've calculated, they used to be 300 hours of diesel. Now they're at approximately 30, and that's 300 liters of fuel is more easier for them to track, as in that capacity they had to sling it in with helicopters, which from Gillum is a 30-minute flight each way, so about an hour and a half, and no passengers are able to be on that flight. So a barrel of fuel coming in is another $3,000 in fuel cost, basically your helicopter cost. That was in a 9-week season with 3-person occupancy, and now that summer season extended to 14 weeks, 6-person occupancy now. They're approximately down to 50 liters in that 14 weeks, which is now able to be brought in by boats. There's boats that bring in tourists, and this is like 2 jerry cans a year that they're now down to, which is significant. And I think that's where it fits into this Manitoba energy grid, that York Factory is so close to all the famous Manitoba hydro dams that are they're very close by. This is right at the mouth of the Nelson, and it's just obviously way too costly to bring in electricity. So solar really offsets the fuel cost in that location, and they have they've now put up a shop with chop saws, skill saws. There's more fridges, more freezers. Obviously, there's surges at the beginning and end of the day. I'll kind of go a little bit there. That's the staff house. That's the picture on the left there shows the east-facing roof with some solar panels. Like I said, these were added on, usually a couple of years apart. So now we have an east-facing, which is covering our morning sun, and that's when the toasters and coffee makers. So it limits the size of battery bank you need. You don't need a massive one to try and capture everything in the middle of the day. The solar on the east side is capturing our morning sun to cover our morning surges. The picture on the right is the latest one, and that's the extra 2 kilowatts. And that's south facing, which has made a huge difference in no runtime at night. So it may not cover our daytime use, as there's not a huge surge around noon. There's no air conditioning on the site, but it allows the system to stock right back up to make it through the night for the fridges, freezers, wastewater system, water system, that kind of thing. This is the west side. More solar there, and then there's water tanks there. Again, it's in a tidal plain, right? So there's water tanks. Those steel tanks are water tanks that Parks Canada put there to you basically fill up with water at low tide, so they're not bringing in brackish or salt water. Wastewater system is in a little white building on the bottom. So they're having really good real world numbers that we can track on this site. One other, just a quick point before I finish up here. There's Polaris makes a electric ATV, the Polaris Ranger EV, and in some of these locations, one of them's in Churchill. There's another one up in Inuvik in Northwest Territories. But we've installed solar on the roofs of these, and it's basically it allows them to have an EV in these locations and not rely on their little microgrid when they're off. So this can go, it extends, it's a significant range extender, but it's also fueling itself. So wherever you park it, if it's parked for the night or the day or a week, it's always charging if there's sun out, and it doubles as is a rain shelter, and it's just another vehicle that's, you know, it's not necessarily, it's an EV that's not adding to the Manitoba grid. So that in that case, solar is really helping the grid in that way by not adding another EV to charge. So that's kind of some of the findings on our off grid presentation. So that is it for me.
Thank you so much. That's excellent information. So we've got some questions coming to us already in the chat. To start off, we have one that is, what is the role of passive solar play in controlling the indoor climate in the buildings? For which you advise people by passive solar, you meant the sun coming through the windows.
Oh yeah, that's a tough question first. Well, I mean, I would say I'm an expert in solar when they become electrons, not when they're still the sun. So I think that's probably something that one of the HVAC guys on the call would be probably more equipped to answer. We don't typically advise on that. Like we're not involved in like the design of the buildings and where the windows are placed or any of that. You know, we're really more concerned with turning those solar arrays into electrons that you can use for energy. But yeah, there's certainly, I mean, I know from the little experience that I do have that there is certainly a big place for passive solar in sustainable buildings, or in all buildings. In fact, even in my own home, you open up the blinds and all of a sudden it's 5 degrees warmer in your living room, right? So yeah, there's certainly something to be said for that, but wouldn't be my area.
Okay, so we had a little bit of, is there anything you wanted to add to that, Tye?
No, that's the only thing I would say in terms of like solar. Like for example, on my roof, I find that it definitely makes the attic cooler, as there's basically an air gap in between your panels and your roof, and it's saving your shingles because they don't see the sun anymore.
Good points, good points. Okay, so kilowatts saved in Manitoba are sold to the US or to Saskatchewan. So do people accept that generating more kilowatts actually does have a positive greenhouse gas story?
Depends who you talk to, I guess. You know, we've certainly tried to make that point, but I mean, I believe there's even time when we're buying power from the US, you know, in the evening, and, you know, there are times when your home is actually powered by coal likely. And, you know, I think it's hard to like, it would be hard to track that enough to be able to make a proper, and I think if there's a comment down a little further about the accounting, and it'd be just very difficult to account for those. So, I mean, you can say it, but whether the person, you know, believes or takes that to heart is another story. But yeah, I mean, the point was made that it is good for the planet, which certainly would be good for the planet.
Okay. Anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I agree. There's a really good. It used to be kind of a black eye for solar is when the panels were at end of life, not producing as much as a new one, and recycling solar panels is making leaps and bounds. Right now, there's all kinds of new technologies and factories popping up that recycle panels, which is good to see.
Yes, let's think about the whole life cycle of things. Okay, so a question here that just ended up to me. So it's that, do you see any demand for solar water preheating in Manitoba at all?
I think solar thermal is very interesting, and like those, you know, vacuum tube solar, it's not something we do again, but I think there is a case for them. You know, would you use them to heat water? I mean, I don't know if you would do it in Manitoba, whether the gain would make it worthwhile, but there's definitely some use case for the technology.
Yeah, in our case, we actually do that quite a bit. Because again, heating water takes such a large amount of power. We have diversion loads basically. So once the batteries are full in an off-grid system, like if the batteries are full by noon, what's the point in wasting the rest of your solar? So that diverts that solar directly into basically a water battery at that point. So it diverts it. It's a diversion load directly to the water tank heater.
Okay, great. So how much do you see battery technology changing lately? So how is that affecting the capacity, the longevity?
In terms of lithium ion, which is the main one we deal with in our EV business. Just a quick example, in the same footprint, because we build battery packs in a physical size. Within, I would say, 4 years, our lithium ion battery packs have been the same size, doubled in capacity in terms of kilowatt hours, and halved in cost. So I think, and that's almost every couple of years it's doing that. So very interesting to see, and they're getting safer all the time in terms of lithium. I think the lead acid and the AGMs have really kind of leveled off in terms of their advancement. You know, they're quite an older technology now, which is just a proven technology. So we still put them in a lot of locations that are, you know, seasonal. So like lithium is more of a likes to be used battery, where an AGM can go to sleep for 9 months and not worry about it. That's some points on batteries from my side.
Yeah, I would say the one thing with batteries, like the technology is moving really fast with lithium batteries and the battery management systems. The one thing that's moving a lot slower is the electrical code and the rules around it. And that's presenting a lot of challenges. Like for Tye, if he's installing in a location where, you know, he's not connecting to a grid and he's not, you know, in a residence, he's not necessarily going to see the struggle that we see where we're trying to, you know, install some lithium batteries. Like, as a matter of fact, we have some in our shop in the back installed, and you know, the difficulty with which the difficulty of getting those installed and passed based on the rules that are currently in place is significant. So you know, we had one installation in the city of Winnipeg that took 9-10 months for permitting just to go through the code deviation requests and meet all the requirements that were required. And some of this stuff is getting built into the 2024 code that's coming out right away, so that we're not going to need to go through those same processes, but it's still quite a difficult thing to be able to install these batteries. So
Yes, I've heard some challenges that the code's been presenting for you folks. So the Greener Homes Grant was harder for low-income homes because of the need for front-load the payments, so the rebates would come months after the expense. Do you think programs that support solar should be focused, or should be trying to address energy poverty, or focus on just adoption?
that's a question that might make me unpopular. Yeah, I mean, I think they maybe need to set some high-end boundaries. Like, should we be giving grants out to people that make $300,000 a year? Maybe not, but like, I also don't think we should be giving grants and loans to people who are making $20,000 a year. Like, there's no point in saddling somebody with a system that they can't afford to maintain. You know, if something goes wrong, then they've got a loan payment in a non-functioning system. Like, that doesn't make sense either. You know, so I think we need to target, you know, maybe on the, you know, lower middle class to, you know, middle class, as opposed to, you're right now, like the way the loan and grant were structured, you needed to have, you know, $30,000 sitting around to pay the bill and then get reimbursed later with a loan, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So there were certainly some problems with the way they did it, and I think the next version will address some of those problems. My hope is that it doesn't just entice a bunch of people who really, you know, shouldn't be installing solar. Like, we often will get requests from like a retiree in her late 60s, early 70s on a fixed income who wants to install solar, and you're like, well, you know, for the little bit that it's going to save you, do you really want to be saddled with a 30-year loan that's tied to your property? Like, that doesn't make any sense either, right? So I mean, we got to be mindful of both aspects. Like, we don't necessarily want to give grants to the ultra rich to do solar, but we also don't want to saddle, you know, poor folks with loans they can't afford for stuff they can't afford to maintain. So
Okay, so next comment is solar totally makes sense, especially if we start thinking about managing climate risk. Are any of your clients thinking about resilience yet?
yeah, oh yeah, everybody wants to install batteries. You know, like a lot of the times, and I'll be honest right now, just with the difficulty of installing batteries, a lot of the times, you know, won't be popular on this call, but a lot of the times we suggest a natural gas generator instead of a battery, just because of, you know, cost and reliability and the ability to get it installed, you know, efficiently, right? So, but we do have those customers and a number of them who say they don't want any more greenhouse gas emitting things on their property, and, you know, solar is certainly a good option for that. For true resiliency and backup with solar, you would need, especially to do it in winter months, you would need to have pretty deep pockets. As Tye
Okay.
can probably attest, I mean, what are the batteries on that house cost there, just as an example?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, it's, you know, you get
100,000 probably.
no at the York factory one. You know, there's two 48-volt banks. They're just probably $6 grand a piece, which isn't bad. But again, that's not winter time. It's not used enough. That's the point.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I typically would have it phrased to the customers, like when they insist that they want to go on with batteries, is that, you know, you would tell them the price of the battery and tell them the price of the energy that they're going to be able to store in that battery. And when you do those numbers, you go, okay, well, for $7,000, you can store $2.20 worth of electricity. You know, you do the math, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
It's not a very efficient right now. It's not a very efficient way, you know, especially if you want to live, you know, like when you're talking about resiliency, do you want to be able to cook when the power goes out? Like you certainly can't do that for a reasonable penny. I mean, the last backup system that we installed was an extra $60,000 for the customer. So.
Okay, so Tye spoke about diversion loads. Daniel, can a grid-tied setup also divert to water heating or storage loads in lieu of batteries?
Don't know about the water heating. I'm sure there's something. There's all sorts of things, but yeah, we can do hybrid systems. And a lot of times what we'll do now is we'll set customers up. If they're insistent that they're going to want backup, we'll set them up with a hybrid system, or at least make it like hybrid capable. So it's just a matter of installing an inverter that's capable of working, and Tye would probably work with a lot of these inverters that are capable of working both in grid tied and in islanding mode. So you know, and we say, okay, well, you don't want to spend the 60 grand now to put batteries in, but we'll, you know, spend an extra 2 grand, and then you're ready to put batteries in the future, and then you can do that. So then it would have the capability of doing both modes.